Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And with me today is a return guest, and she's a return guest, but she's a superstar in the literary world. Why do I say that? Well, this is Millie Florence. Millie started writing as a professional writer. She had her first book published when she was 13 years old. Now, if you're watching this on video and you see her now, and I tell you that she's 20 years old, you may be like, well, she doesn't look 20, right? But she is. She's been a professional writer for 7 years. 7 years, right? And she's got a brand new book getting ready to come out. She had a brand new book that we talked about the last time. So let's go through all this so you can kind of see where she is and what she's up to. So she self-published her first book, which was called Honey Butter. She was 13 years old. She hasn't stopped ever since. She's been writing and continued to write. Then she likes to publish what she calls whimsical fiction for kids. So she recently published a book called The Balter of Ashton Harper, which came out in October of 2023. And that was, let's see, you published that on Bandersnatch,
hmm
right? And now you have a brand new book coming out. So this is really exciting to hear. I want you to tell us more about this and all the different people you're getting to work with on this. So there's a new book coming out that is scheduled to be released in January of 2025, and it's called Beyond Mulberry Glen, which is kind of like maybe a second edition to something that you previously wrote. Like it's like the next new thing. And you're going to be working and releasing that with Waxwing Books, and that's going to be coming out in January of 2025. So, for people that are here right now, I'll tell you right away, how do you get to Millie? It's millieflorence.com. That's her website. You can get all her social media, find out about her Instagram, her Facebook, her YouTube channel. She has links to audio. You can hear about audio portions of her book. And anyways, there's so much, much more. But what we really want to do today, because what I love to do is that I know we talk about our parents that are out there, but for young people that are aspiring writers, nothing better to figure out how is it that you can become what? You can be someone like Millie by hearing it directly from the person who's doing it and your age group. There's me saying, oh yeah, you can do this, right? But I'm an old guy, right? But it's way better to hear from somebody who's actually in the field doing it right now. So Millie, first of all, welcome back. We're so glad to have you back on A Plus Parents.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be back.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I got to see you back in Cincinnati at the Great Homeschool Convention in Cincinnati. And so we got to say hey again and get connected. And it turns out we're going to see each other again in Florida at the Florida Parent Education Association, the FPEA in Orlando, that's coming up in May. And then you and I are going to both be in Arizona too. So we're going to get to see each other a little bit here over the summer. So that's awesome. And I know you told me, the travel that you're getting ready to do. And so, young people, if you're listening right now, this is kind of like sometimes this sounds super cool. And then sometimes it's kind of like, well, how cool really is it? Right. Because you've got a series of conventions that you're getting ready to do. And Billy told me as we were getting ready to start the recording that, that she's actually in the next month, she's going to be on the road more than she's home. So now some
Yes.
people, when you hear that, you might think, oh my gosh, that's cool. I want to do that. And then what I can share with you, my own personal experience, is it is cool for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, yeah, then after a while, you're like, okay, well, I kind of like to be home, be with my family, those kind of things. So, anyway, okay, well, Millie, first of all, welcome back. It is great that you're here. Thank you for being here. Let's start with Beyond Mulberry Glen. You're getting something, and you're
Absolutely.
saying that it's republished. So, what's the story? Tell us about that. That you're a writer. You got to give us the story, right? So,
Yeah,
tell
of
us the
course, of
story
course.
about what's happening there. Yeah.
So, Beyond Mulberry Glen, it was originally published when I was 15 years old. I originally self-published it. Um, and it was one of my two books. Like for a long time, my two books were Honey Butter and Beyond Mulberry Glen, although it had a slightly different title at the time because I've since changed the title with the republication. So anyone who's been a fan of me for like a few years ago, those are probably the two books you remember, right? And it wasn't until last year, 2023, I was at Great Homeschool Conventions in Missouri, and I'd been going there for several years, right? So I kind of knew the drill, you know. And one night, after it was like the first, or no, it was the second day of the convention because the convention is 3 days. So the second day of the convention, me and my dad and my sister were going to get dinner at the end of the day, and we got in the hotel elevator to take it down to the first floor. It goes down a few floors, The doors open, and who should step in but Sarah Mackenzie?
Awesome.
And I'm a huge Sarah Mackenzie fan and Read Aloud Revival fan. I literally grew up listening to her podcast and reading all the books on her like recommended reading lists. So as you can imagine, I was like so excited. And I of course spoke up and I was like, oh my goodness, you're Sarah Mackenzie. It is so exciting to meet you in person because I'd never met her in person before. Even though I'd been doing these conventions. And we had like a 30-second conversation in the elevator where I told her, it's really cool to meet you. I'm an author. I have a booth at the convention. And then we both left the elevator. And that was it. I didn't even give her a business card because I'd actually run out of business cards at the event. And I remember just like walking out of the elevator into the car with my dad, like my eyes just like saucers, like, oh my goodness, I just met Sarah Mackenzie. And that entire night while we were like getting dinner and stuff, me and my dad were, discussing, okay, so you need to go and like find her tomorrow and be like, hey, remember me from the elevator, because I'd always wanted to be on her podcast. So the next day, I'm at my booth selling my books, and a mom comes up and she goes straight to my booth and points to Honey Butter and goes, hey, can I buy this? Sarah Mackenzie just told me it was phenomenal. So,
How awesome is that?
first of all, I was like, what on earth happened? How, like, what does this mean? She's read it? Right? But that must mean she somehow looked me up, but I didn't give her a business card. Like, so then at the end of the day, I went and I found Sarah and I talked to her. And it turned out that night, after getting off the elevator and like she went to dinner with some like friends at the convention, she looked me up, watched my YouTube videos, bought the ebook of Honey Butter from Amazon, read it that night, and was recommending it to people, multiple people, the next day at the convention, which was absolutely insane.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely like in my opinion, like a Holy Spirit nudge moment.
Yeah.
Um, and so then we took a picture together. She was like, I definitely want you to be on the podcast. Let's get dinner together at the next convention we're at. And the next convention we were at was a month later in Cincinnati, Ohio, 2023, I believe. So the month passes and I'm like getting ready to release Balter. I'm like doing work on that. So now I'm like, I want to talk about getting on the podcast with her. I maybe at dinner, she would even be willing to like provide an endorsement for Balter or, like post about it or something like that. So that was my thought going into dinner with her at the next convention. I go to dinner with her at the next convention. We have about like 15 minutes of small talk. And then so it's me and her, and also her editor is there, and my mom is there as well. So 15 minutes of small talk, and then Sarah Mackenzie like glances over at her editor, and her editor gives her this like nod, and she turns back to me and goes, okay, so we would like to republish your book.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, just completely wild experience. Like, it's the sort of thing where I write fiction. I could not have written a better plot twist than all of that.
Right. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Wow, that's amazing. Well, first of all, congratulations, right? And shout out to Sarah Mackenzie for recognizing true talent. Way to go, Sarah, right? So that's awesome.
You're sweet,
Really,
thank you.
really cool. Yeah, that's great. So, okay, well, you've got a book and here you are and you're like, being creative and thinking of new ideas. And what's it like to come back and then take a look at something that you published years ago and then to go in and edit it and republish it? What's that been like for you? Because that's got to be a whole different experience than when you're in that creative part and you're creating something new.
It is. And well, I've edited and I do edit all of my books a lot, like multiple drafts. But editing Beyond Mulberry Glen was a completely different experience. Because so the way that I've described it to people is like, imagine being told you have to go back and retake your freshman year of high school. Because for me, my books, they're so personal to me and so close to my heart and really like a reflection of who I was at the time, that editing that book, I had to like put myself back in my 15-year-old mindset, because I was 15 when I wrote it and published it. And obviously I was 19 and 20 now, when I was like doing edits on it. And also I want to be clear here. Nothing major about the book or plot line is changing. It was more smaller edits to like individual scenes or a couple plot lines that I tightened up, because I really did want to stay true to that 15-year-old version of myself. And also because I've had people, who read the book and who love it. Like I have readers for that book already. I'm about to get a lot more readers for it. But the smaller group of readers I have for it already are, big fans of it. So I wanted to really like stay true to that. And I did my best to, honor the story. I improved it, but I didn't majorly change it. Because if it's this weird thing of like, I've learned so much as a writer that if I got the idea for Beyond Mulberry Glen now, it would be a completely different story than it is when I wrote it when I was 15 and even when I edited it. And so it's a weird thing to kind of come to terms with that like younger voice of yours and figure out how to improve it while still keeping its essence. And yeah, it's really interesting. And this is something that I've heard other authors, like even really famous authors, have dealt with as well. And I remember like I've read some forewords to like later editions of books by like really famous authors like Orson Scott Card, who wrote Ender's Game, and a couple others, who mention like how weird it is in their like forewords of these later editions to like go back and edit stuff, and how much do you change. And yeah, there are so many authors who they've published books that people adore, but because they grow as a person, as an author, they'll then look back and like feel embarrassed by it, by these like best-selling classic books, which is forever very interesting to me. And it makes me feel better about my own writing. But yeah, Beyond Mulberry Glen will always be the book I wrote when I was 15. And yeah, it's really like humbling and so cool that book is about to get like a whole new audience. It has a new cover. It's going to get Waxwing Books is distributed by Baker and Taylor, which for those of you who are in the publishing world, that's kind of a big deal. It's definitely bigger than what I've been doing. So yeah, it's a really cool experience. And it's something I never could have imagined. So I really hope people love the book even more in this rendition of it.
That's amazing. Well, okay. So, if you think about, you were 13 when you started, you're 20 now, you're going back and having a chance to revisit your own work from when you were 15, and you've just stepped into a production phase in your publisher that, let's just say, it's big time, right? You're like, you're getting into that world of really getting known. So, there's lots of young people and there's lots of parents of young people that are listening right now. And as they're listening, one of the things, oftentimes we get started with something and we like it and it's kind of a passion for us. And then it starts to kind of fade away. We think, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or there's too many other people doing it already. I mean, there's so many reasons we could come up with something to talk ourselves out of something. Have you ever noticed that? It's like,
Yeah.
And who's the one telling us all that? It's inside our head. It's like, if we talk to anybody else outside, they're going to tell us to keep going. But we're so quick to talk ourselves out of things. So, for our younger people that are listening, for parents that are trying to support or want to support their younger people that have that passion for writing, what advice do you have for kids that want to take that passion? And by the way, it's not just about writing, but any passion you have, and the turning passion into a profession. What advice do you have for people about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say to parents, you absolutely should encourage your kids to follow their passions. Like, take note of what they're interested in, what they're excited at, what they're good at, and just be encouraging about it. And like, I think one of the biggest things parents can do to support that is ask questions and listen to your child talk about it. I made it was like a funny like joke reel on Instagram a while ago that was like just joking about like me ranting to my parents about the books I'm writing, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. But even when you don't fully understand what your child is excited about, even when it's not something you're excited about, it is so valuable to listen. And to just be encouraging and ask questions. I know for my family, like my younger brother, he is a professional drone racer, which some people don't even know that that is a thing that exists. Um, so as you can imagine, he has lots of like technical knowledge of how to build drones and fly drones and all the things and like drone like filming and stuff that we have no idea about. And we used to joke that like, yeah, we don't know what he's talking about. He's like speaking in a different language, right? But my parents were still like super encouraging of it and willing to ask questions and listen to him talk about LiPo batteries and ESCs, you know.
Oh, that's funny. Wait, and there's also the places where you're allowed to fly the drone and where you're not allowed to fly the drone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
He
that too,
studied for
right?
like a ham radio license and yeah, all that stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, just like listening to your kids, even when you don't fully understand, like, you hear the phrase like fake it till you make it. That applies also to encouraging and supporting your kids, I think. Like, even if you don't fully understand, encourage them still and listen and let them explain it to you. Because actually, like, learning to explain something to someone is like, that's how a lot of people learn. There's this Latin phrase that I love because I love Latin. Docendo disco scribendo cogito, which means I learn by teaching and think by writing. And like taking the time to explain something to someone or to teach something to someone else teaches you in return. So
Right.
not only is it encouraging for kids to have a parent motivating them and encouraging them and telling them that this dream you have is valuable, this is great, you should pursue this. Not only is it encouraging, but it also is genuinely like it teaches them more about the thing that they're excited about because they have to learn how to explain it to someone else, and in the process they teach themselves more about it. So that would be my first bit of advice for parents, if you have a kid who is passionate about something. But my next, I think my biggest piece of advice for the kids here is, first of all, confidence. You should like develop that confidence to put yourself out there because you never know if you don't try, right? I was in a writing conference recently with an agent, and the session was on like pitching to publishers, like pitching your book to publishers to see if they'll be interested in it. And one of the pieces of advice she gave was don't self-reject. And in her context, she was saying like, don't choose not to send your book to a publisher or an agent because you think they won't accept it. Because then they definitely won't if you don't send it, And I think that applies to other passions as well. Don't self-reject. Don't like putting yourself out there and trying is in and of itself success. And this is actually like the whole theme of my book, The Balter of Ashton Harper. It's about kids chasing their dreams and being unafraid to put yourself out there and being okay with failure, because failure, first of all, you define failure for yourself. But also I would say that like failure is a sign that you're trying. And if you're trying, then you're already on the path to success. So, what is failure really?
Right. I couldn't agree more. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then my other piece of advice would be treasure the time you have to create while you can. Like when you're young, that is the time to pursue your passions, right? When you're in high school, when you're like those younger like teen ages, go for it because you have the support of your parents. Like you have like so much more time than you'll have later in life. So now is the time to invest in that, to invest in what you love and what you're excited about, to take some risks, to save your money and spend it on a booth at a convention. Like I did my first convention. I like saved my money from babysitting and stuff and bought a booth at a convention, right? Like that's the time in your life to do that. Because your time is only going to get like shrunk from there, the further you go in life when you have more responsibilities. So when you're a kid is genuinely the time to take risks and, go do that. And even once you like start to succeed in that area, like I've seen this for me, as I've started to see more success and do more things in terms of marketing, and like I'm traveling so much this month, like you mentioned before, that means I have less time to write. So again, even if you're going to succeed in that, you're still going to have less time to practice that actual craft once people start noticing you. So cherish that time when people aren't paying attention to you to really practice your craft and improve it, whatever that craft looks like for you. I think those would be my two biggest tips. And also, like, never stop improving. There's always more to learn. Don't settle for fine. Aim for 1% better every time, right?
Love it. Love it. You mentioned something that I think is, well, there were so many things you said that were just brilliant, right? And especially about teaching other people, because you really do understand more when you're able to communicate and teach someone else. But you said something interesting. And here you are, you're 7 years into this. You've got yourself, you've got several books published, you got more books being published, you're getting into some of the bigger publishing houses now, and yet you still go to conferences and conventions to improve your own craft. And I think that that is huge because, for us, it's never a done deal, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
like always get 1% better. And if you just get 1% better each time, and how do you measure 1%? You just tell yourself, right? You just know. It's like, look, this was a little more than the last time, and whatever that looks like and how that works. So, well, I just think that's brilliant. And I love that what you said about now is the time as a young person, because it's funny, as you get older and, I look at my own family and I have kids and I'm working and, I've got all these things going on in life, right? And, to think back to when I was a teenager and think back to the time that I had and what was I spending my time on? And was it
Right.
really inside of my passion, right? And the funny thing is, like, when I look back and I think about myself when I was your age, and even younger, what was I doing every day? And I was playing music every day. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, as a musician, and I was actually pretty decent way back when, right? But what happened was I didn't pursue it, and I let myself talk myself out of it. And I did so much to the point where I actually had a scholarship to go to college for music.
Oh,
And I didn't
really?
do it. I talked myself out of it, and it was like, because I thought, well, what if I'm not good enough? I'm not going to make it. There's
You
going to be
self-rejected.
yeah, exactly, right. There's so many other guys that I was a trumpet player, there's better people than me, and blah, 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 right? And I thought, no, I need to go to college to study something where I can get a good job. And turns out I ended up doing that and I was miserable, right? Now,
Yeah.
I still play a little music today, but nothing like what I used to do. And I think back to then, it was like I was playing, I was practicing, 2, 3 hours a day. And that was after school. During school, I had 2 or 3 music classes. So, it was like my whole day was around that. So
Yeah.
interesting. So I love that you say that, this is the time now as a young person to really dive in and really explore and take those passions, and definitely that you can turn those passions into what? Into a career. So I'll tell you
Yes.
something somebody told me, and it's really interesting. And I didn't find this out until, let's see, I did this interview in 2008, and it was the same year that my program, Mr. D Math, got started. So that's how much of a difference this interview had. So I went out and I found 5 millionaires, the people that I knew, and I didn't know them that well. Why? Because I wasn't in that status with them, right? But I
Right.
knew them enough to get an interview with them. And I went through and I talked to them and I asked them about, what they, how they got to where they were. They were super, super different from each other. And they had one thing in common. The
What
only
was
one
it?
thing. And you know what it was? That they were doing what they loved to do. All,
Yeah.
and they were so different. But one guy in particular, and he was an engineer. So this was so weird for him to say this because it's not his thing, right? But what he said to me is he said, if you're doing what you love to do, the money will find you.
Yeah.
And I
And I can,
thought,
yeah.
yeah, right. And
I
I was like,
relate to that. And I also think it's like, I think maybe a reason for that is because when you're passionate about something, when you're genuinely excited about something, that's not something you can manufacture, right?
right.
And that passion and that drive automatically puts you a step up above other people who are just doing it to make money, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then you're called to do something, right? Next thing you
Yes.
know, you're stepping into an elevator and there's Sarah McKenzie, right? So,
Right.
but it really does come to that. And, I started the company the same year. It was not too long after I did those interviews with those guys. And I was like, this is my passion. This is what I'm up to. It's what I love to do. And the company got started and there's been no looking back. even when people around me, this is really funny because even when people around me, this is the one time that I got over the self-talk because I had more people around me saying, nobody's going to want to buy your math videos, you know?
Yeah.
And it was funny because I was like, nope, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I literally didn't look back and it made a huge difference. But I was, I was in my 40s by the time that came around. So, anyway, you look back and you think about here you are, you're 20 years old and you're already living that kind of a mentality that took me, much, much longer in life to get to. So congratulations. And that you're sharing that with our young listeners right now, because it really, even here I was an old guy discovering it and it works, but don't wait till you're 40 or you're 50, right? Do it when you're 15, do it when you're 18, do it when you're 12, like whenever that looks like.
Yes.
So really cool.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about Beyond Mulberry Glen. What is the
Absolutely.
book about? Tell us about the book. What's it about?
Of course. Okay, so Beyond Mulberry Glen is the story of 11-year-old Lydia Green, who lives in the magical realm of the Valleylands with her mismatched family of fairies and philosophers. Until one day, that is, when she hears about a mysterious force known as the Darkness that dwells within the forest Tenebrae. But not only does it dwell within the forest, lately it has begun to creep into Lydia's own mind. And that is where our story begins.
Wow. Okay, now you're not reading that out of the book, but you said that very well. I'm like, wow, I can get why you're a writer. Wow, that was really cool. I'm like, wow, I want to find out more about that. That's awesome.
Thank you. Well, and you
Okay,
want to know a secret behind that? Is
yeah, absolutely.
I have pitches like that memorized for every single one of my books. Because
Gotcha. Okay.
I have said them so many times at conventions because you
Right.
have people walk up to the booth. What is your book about? Eventually, I memorized a thing for each of them. Um and and that's another thing I wanted to mention just for like kids out there pursuing their passions, because there are so many things you don't think about like being a part of pursuing something that end up being a part of it. Like, when you think about publishing books, you think of like, oh, I need to get good at grammar and spelling and story structure and editing. What they don't tell you is that public speaking is a huge part of it.
Right. That's
And
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, because they get nervous about public speaking, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I think one of the easiest ways to get over it is to just do it. And it's
Yes.
get up in front of people and start to practice at home. Get mom and
Practice
dad,
in front of a
brothers and
mirror.
sisters. Oh, that's a great idea. Get in front of the
Yeah.
mirror and talk to yourself. Make eye contact with yourself because you'll know when you're saying something that's spot on, and you'll know when you're saying something that's not. So really good. Okay, so you said something about the book about kind of like that darkness and how it started to
Mhm.
creep into her mind. So you wrote this when you were 15.
Yes.
What's your inspiration behind the book? How did this actually come about?
Yeah, of course. So the first piece of inspiration for the book was simply that I wanted to write a fantasy book. Because the first book I wrote and published was Honey Butter, which is a contemporary. It takes place in the real world. Um, and that was intentional on my part. Like when I published Honey Butter, and I think we maybe touched on this in my last podcast, but I specifically wanted to write something simple and something that I could do really well. Something simple, something short, something I could do really well. But I had always wanted to write a fantasy novel. I had always wanted to write something that took place in another world with magic and epic quests and fairies and yeah, just all the whimsical, wonderful, magical things. So once I published Honey Butter, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for the next thing. I think I'm ready to write a fantasy novel that's a little bit, a little bit longer, a little bit more complex with magic systems, that sort of thing. So that was part of it, was just I knew I wanted to write like a classic fairy tale fantasy. So I kind of had that in my mind. And then in terms of like the theme, the really like the heart of the story is, for me, I have always struggled with the idea of growing up and change. And Beyond Mulberry Glen was my way of exploring that topic. I mean, like, there is a reason that I was so determined to publish Honey Butter so young. And part of that was like, I don't want to forget what it's like to be a kid, you know?
Hmm.
And that's just always been something with me, is like it's difficult for me to leave like childhood behind, and something that I've always been worried about is like losing like my my sense of self, like who I am as I grow up. Because you see a lot of you encounter a lot of different influences in the world as you grow up. And I knew that and I recognized that even at a young age, partially because I was reading so many books
Right.
from characters of like multiple different ages. And I just knew I yeah, so I've always kind of had that fear of like losing who I really am as I grow up. And once you start to encounter those darknesses in the world and like, will you let that change you, or will you keep growing towards the light? And that's really the heart of Beyond Mulberry Glen and Lydia's like main internal conflict, as we say in the writing world.
Right. Wow. You think about, okay, you're 20 right now, right? And you think about, think 5 years ago when you were 15.
Mm-hmm.
And you think just in the last 5 years and the changes, right? People that are 15 are dealing with all kinds of different things. Their bodies
Yes.
are changing, their thoughts are changing, they're starting to develop ideas on their own. So, kind of like dealing with the fact that you're going through changes. What a great time to have a book about someone who's going through those changes, and you can kind of adapt with them and learn with them and grow with them. So, in fact, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, because it's like, so people are going to read this book. Young people read the books. Moms are going to read the book. Sarah Mackenzie's reading your book, right? So so you've got this great reader base. But when you think about the book, and especially from the mindset of where you have written it from, what's one thing that you really want your readers to take away with them after they've read Beyond Mulberry Glen?
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to pause and edit out this because I need to blow my nose before
Of
I
course,
get to that. Hang
absolutely.
on just a
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, we got the little musical interlude here, and Millie's got she's taking care of her well-being. So that's awesome. She'll be right back. So when she comes back, one of the things that I wanted to know is, it's like, you're reading a book like this, right? And you're a young person, you're reading the book, and you're seeing, like, everything's changing in the world, and you're seeing things differently. Your eyes are opening. Maybe you're moving, or meeting new people, and all these different things. And now you read a book like Beyond Mulberry Glen. So the question for Millie is, writing a book like that, what is one thing, maybe it was probably a lot of things, right? But what's the one thing for you that you want your readers to take away with them after they finish reading the book?
So there's a phrase in the book, grow towards the light.
Mm,
And I think that is the main concept, the main thing I want people to take away from it. The idea that life is never going to be perfect. There are always like things that are going to be hard no matter what. No matter how hard we try, but we still have to keep trying. We have to keep growing towards the light. And, just because something is hard doesn't mean it's not worth it. And there's a lot of nature reference within the book. And something that, again, they talk about in the book is like trees that grow, they will never reach the sun, but they will get closer to it. And for me and for my faith, it's also like we're never going to reach, God's standards for us. We're never going to reach heaven here on earth, but we can keep pursuing it regardless.
right.
And even though we'll never get there, we will get closer. Um, and I also love the idea. And again, there's so many like nature references within this book that I love. And one of them is sunflowers, because sunflowers throughout the day, and anyone who has a garden with sunflowers will know this, they turn their heads, their flowers, towards the light, and they turn throughout the day to make sure they're always facing the light. And if you think about that in like a human context, like it takes energy and intention and purpose to keep turning towards that light throughout the day, throughout your life, but it is worth doing.
Yeah.
It is worth pursuing. And that's the main idea. That's the one thing I hope everyone takes away from it, is like, yeah, grow towards the light. It's always worth it.
I love that. I think that's great. Grow towards the light. That's awesome. It comes right back to you, what? Just 1% more each day. That's all,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Just
Yeah,
keep going in the direction, and go in the direction of the light. So grow towards the light. What a great way for us to come to the end of this time that we're together. But now that you got a new book coming out in January of 2025, we're gonna have to come back together again. And what we'll plan to do is
absolutely.
Yeah, let's plan to get together right before the release date. We'll get back, we'll get together, talk more about this. And yeah, Millie, just super excited to hang out with you. And you're really, it's inspiring to be around you, right? And you're an inspiration. So, that's for me, it's that's huge because it's one of the things that I get to experience around being around homeschoolers and people who've been homeschooled because they do what? They get to look to see how they can be inspiring in the world, how they can make a difference. And here you are doing it, and you're living your passion, you're living your dream, and now you're willing to share with others about the things that you're up to and how you did it. And I think some of the advice you gave today, I don't want to say I think, I know some of the advice you gave today, especially for young people, to hear it from another young person, it's spot on and it makes a difference. So, get in,
Thank
get
you.
going. Yeah, really, really excited for you. So congratulations on all your accomplishments and especially with the new book coming out. Really, really cool. So it's kind of like, I'm going to get to say, wow, man, I knew you win, right? So there we go. Very, very cool. Well, Millie, thanks for being here. We'll come back together and do this again right before the new book comes out. And for everybody,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you today, everybody, for listening.
And can I
And
mention how people can get the book?
absolutely. Oh, yeah, yeah. Of course, they already probably want to know, right? So yeah, do.
Yeah, because it is currently up for pre-orders. Beyond Mulberry
Oh,
Glen is available for pre-order now. It
okay.
won't arrive until it comes out January of 2025. So at the beginning of the new year. But you can pre-order it now on pretty much any online bookstore. If you need to figure out how to find it, you can go to my website, millieflorence.com, or the Waxwing website. Either one. We have pages for the book. And yeah, any online place that sells books, pretty much.
Okay. Awesome. So start at Millie's website, millieflorence.com. You can go to Waxwing or anything, and you're looking for Beyond Mulberry Glen. So how cool. How fun is that? Hey, and by the way, when you're at all these conventions, are you doing authors signing for young people when
I
they come in?
am. Yeah, I'm
Okay. All
signing all the
right,
books.
good. That's awesome. All right. Well, if you happen to be in any of the places where Millie is, and if you happen to live in Arizona or you live in Florida and you see and there's a homeschool convention coming to your area, just go on the homeschool organization, take a look and see who the vendors are. You'll see Millie's name there, and then come and meet her and say hi in person and get a copy of her book and ever sign it.
Absolutely.
That'd be fun. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll be back. We'll do this again. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to A Plus Parents. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.